And this is a DC nonprofit, connects with local young people, companies in the area, and 3 of our students today are in attendance there, interns at the Bank of America. This is a great program that helps the community, and there's more information on your chair about being involved. And as you came in, you might have gotten one of these cards. Very exciting. Baby's first book, The Right Fights Back, the first in a series of ebooks that Politico is doing about this campaign. This is something that's never been done to sort of tell the behind-the-scenes story in real time. I think we maybe announced the book in Playbook, but this is the first time we've really talked about it. We have some fantastic interviews with some of the candidates. We talk about what it's like to be out there having John King scream at you or whatever it's like to be a candidate. And we go behind the scenes with all the advisors and sort of give you a sense of who is going to be running these campaigns. So you can also get it at politico.com/bookshelf. So that's it. Thank you very much for being here. I'm going to bring you into the conversation in just a minute, but let's get started with Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, good morning. Now, Senator, as soon as you leave here, you're going to make some news. You and a fellow freshman senator, Senator Chris Coons, Democrat of Delaware, are going to go out and are going to be talking about what you call a real bipartisan job creation plan. I feel like we need jobs, not jobs plans. What's different here?
Well, first of all, the frustrating thing is that we fight about things we agree on. There are significant policy differences between Republicans and Democrats, and a lot of it is based on significant, ideological differences, and that's why we have elections. So, as far as the role of government and all that, there's a big difference of opinion. We're not going to come to agreement on that. That's why we're going to have an election here in 2012 and beyond that to try to help decide.
So wait, you're giving up already?
Well, there are issues we're not going to agree on. I mean, we're just not. I mean, there are things that.
Okay, let's talk about things we can agree on.
But that's why it's called the Agree Job. It's called the bill's called the Agrees Plan. Right, and the Agree Act. And it's basically, we went through everything Republicans had proposed, Democrats had proposed, the President had proposed, the Jobs Council proposed, and we tried to identify things that were in all of the plans, and we put those in one bill. So is it going to save us? Is it going to turn around the economy in its totality? No, but what it's going to do is 2 things. One is actually pass things we agree on. But I think secondly, more importantly, send a message, which is that we can still get things done here in Washington. Because one of the things that I think is having a dramatic psychological impact on consumer confidence in the economy in general is the inability of this process here to function, to actually get to a result. So we're going to try to move the ball forward, but we'll see how it works out.
All right, now I don't want to induce a Rick Perry moment here, but do you know what AGREE stands for?
No, I mean the actual acronym?
Yes,
no,
that's a good answer.
Good
See, he learned.
But I also didn't come up with it, so I want to make, and I didn't come up with the AGREE acronym. That's what's important is what's in the bill, and that I know pretty well, and we'll continue to flush that out and hopefully add things to it. I mean, we're looking for people who have ideas.
So what's something, there's parts of it, as you mentioned, from the White House, there's parts of it from GOP legislative plans. What's something in it that the White House will love, that will make President Obama say, man, I love the AGREE Act?
I think all of it are things that he's supportive of for the most part. Well, for example, the bonus to the 179 provision, I don't want to get too technical, but basically it's a provision that allows small businesses, it's not only limited to small businesses, but it's largely taken advantage of by small businesses. It allows them to write off 100% of the cost of capital purchases, any investments they make in their business, things that they buy, even things that they lease in the next year. That's set to expire. That's really important for businesses that are looking to next year's tax uncertainty and saying, well, maybe next year's not the right time to invest in our business because we're going to have to pay taxes on this. So I think everybody will like that. I think there's things in there as well about immigration, about the per-country quotas that are in place that I think hurt us in terms of attracting high-quality immigrations that especially high-tech businesses need. So the point of the bill is I think no one's going to be able to look at it and say, I don't like something in it. If there's going to be a criticism, is, well, this doesn't solve all of our problems. And we concede that from the start. But I think what it does, it shows that there are things we do agree on, and that on the things we agree on, whatever that stands for, we're going to be able to work together.
All right, now, Senator, you're trying to put a crack or a thaw, depending on your analogy, in Washington gridlock. And you look at this with a little bit of a fresh eye. You were at the top of Florida politics, came to Washington, you're a freshman senator. Clearly, short-term political gain is part of the reason for our gridlock. What else? Like, what's your diagnosis?
Well, part of it is a real significant ideological difference of opinion about the role of government in our country. And we can't understate that. And that's not just in Washington, that's in America. I mean, you look across the country at the constituencies that elect, someone out of San Francisco is going to have a difference of opinion about the role of government of a constituency that elects somebody out of Northwest Florida, for example. So what happens when somebody from Northwest Florida comes up here to serve in the House, and someone from San Francisco gets here and serves in the House? They're going to have a difference of opinion about the role of government.
Just as a random example.
Exactly. But I mean, what they do is they're going to reflect the people that sent them here. And that's part of this conversation we need to have as a country. I mean, and there are choices to be made and consequences to each of these choices. In the end, I think all Americans generally want a country that's both compassionate and prosperous. And finding what government's role should be in accomplishing those dual goals has really been at the center of our political debate for the better part of close to a century now, and certainly at the core of what we're talking about today.
Now, there's one thing that every single person in this room, every single person on the live stream is interested in, and that's what's going to go on with the super committee. So let's start at the beginning. Was it a good idea?
I didn't vote for it, and I didn't think it was. Ultimately, we have a responsibility, all of us do, to come up here and do our job. They pay us to do our job. We wanted this job. Every single one of us ran because we wanted to in both the House and Senate, and that's why we have the process. When you create these extraordinary entities, what you're basically conceding is that this republic, as designed over 200 years ago and has evolved over time, can't deal with the most pressing issues of our time. But secondly, I think the super committee is going to face the same challenges that the Congress in general faces. And that's a significant ideological difference of opinion about the role of government. And those big issues like that is what this election needs to be about, and what the decision this country needs to make about what kind of government it wants to have.
Super committee, they will succeed, they will fail.
Well, I don't want to say they're going to fail, because I don't think anyone are rooting, even though I wasn't in favor of it. I would love nothing more than to wake up tomorrow morning and see that.
No, I'm not asking what you want.
Well, I think here, but it's important, because I don't want the headline from here to be that it's already failed, let's walk away from it. These guys and gals have worked really hard, and I don't want to diminish the hard work they've put in, and the work they're still doing, and I'm hopeful that something meaningful will happen. But I wouldn't, put a lot of money on it. Wouldn't put any money on it.
There's your answer.
Certainly not 1.1 trillion, but I mean, let's wait and see.
All right, Senator, you're a bit of a bridge. You were the ultimate state government insider in Florida, and yet you managed very early to capture the imagination, energy of the Tea Party. People in this room didn't think you were going to be the senator. How did you do that?
People in this room, people in a lot of rooms I was in didn't think that. And on some days, neither did I. And, two things. I think the insider-outsider thing is not really the way to analyze it. I think it's a question of why is someone going into office? Is it because they want to do something, or because they want to be somebody? And there's a fundamental difference between those two things. And we're all guilty in the political process of wanting to be liked, ultimately. I mean, nobody likes to be disliked, and everyone, but there do come times in your career when you have to make a decision, am I in this to make a difference? Or am I in this because I want to use it as a catapult for something else, or because I want to be a celebrity, or just want to be loved? And I think too much in politics over the last 20, 30 years, we've had a lot of people that have gotten involved because they want to be liked. And I felt that was one of the fundamental things that plagued our process and our party. And I, on the other hand, ran because I wanted to make a difference. I thought, that's really the thing that motivated me to get in the race. I didn't see anybody else running that would stand for the things I wanted my next senator to stand for.
So how did you make that original connection with that sort of populist movement? What specific issue or language worked for you in establishing this?
Well, I wish I could tell you it was part of some sort of brilliant calculation, but it really wasn't. I got in the race, and when I got in the race, there was no one else running that was saying the things that I felt, which was early in 2009. President Obama was elected. He had majorities in the House and Senate. They moved very rapidly on things like, the stimulus plan, and then moved on from there off, obviously, to the health care bills. So there was a counter reaction to that. It was an expansion of government's role that people weren't comfortable with. And I think what our campaign was able to do was give voice to an alternative to that. And as I said, I didn't just want to be the opposition. I wanted to be an alternative. At a time when I think the Republican Party was still having this debate about whether, in order to be effective in the future, Republicans had to elect people that were more like Democrats. And that never made sense to me. And we don't need two Democrat parties. We already have one. And so these are the kinds of things that we were able to articulate that I think helped us along the way.
So is that what you're saying, is that moderate Republicans are the equivalent of a second Democratic Party?
No, I wouldn't. The term moderate is...
Well, that is what you just said.
Yeah, no, but the term moderate is used as a label. The very few people fit neatly in any of these labels we like to create. The bigger point was that I think there has to be a voice for limited government in America. And the Republican Party does well when it's a legitimate voice on behalf of limited government. That doesn't mean no government, but it means a proper role for government. And I think that's where the Republican Party's, at the end of the day, that's where it really draws its strength.
Right. Senator, how durable is the Tea Party? What I've asked before, is the Tea Party a mood or a movement?
Well, I think you're watching how durable it is in the sense that the Tea Party is not an organization. It is a movement, and it's not just a movement, it's a sentiment. that's found its way expression into a movement. This sentiment is not new, it just didn't have social media and the ability of people who didn't know each other to connect and work.
So, Senator, in 4 years, will we be talking about the Tea
We
Party?
will, and there's certainly to continue to be a factor, because the things the Tea Party believes in, which is a constitutional limited role for government, it's not going to go away. It'll continue to be a vibrant force in American
Do you think
politics.
it'll come to be any more centralized? It certainly would be more effective if they could raise.
No, I don't think it'll ever become an organization. If it does, it'll end up quickly falling apart. I think it draws its strength from the fact that it's a legitimate grassroots movement of everyday people from all over the country who share differences of opinions on a bunch of issues, but ultimately on the core of what the role of government should be, find commonality, and are able to express it now in ways that weren't available to us 20 years ago.
The one argument I've sort of seen for the idea that the Tea Party would not last, and some of you have heard me express this over a iced tea or whatever we were having at the moment, but that whoever becomes the Republican nominee this time will almost by definition have found a way, as you did, to bridge the establishment and the Tea Party. I wonder if that sort of dilutes this sort of vivid, colorful Tea Party that we so like to cover.
You know, I don't think so. I think they'll be held accountable. I mean, obviously they'll be...
They being the nominee.
The nominee, as members of Congress are now, on what did you campaign on, what did you say you stood for, and then at the same time, are you doing it now? So I think that it'll serve as an accountability mechanism, not just to the individual candidates, but to the Republican Party.
All right, Playbook is big on birthdays. Senator, you're the second youngest senator?
Yes, by 6 days, that's right. Mike Lee's 6 days younger than me.
Okay.
So he says.
All right. You're both 4-0. What sort of culture shock was there for you coming into the Senate? With that fresh eye,
Yeah.
what do you see in a place that's much older and very seniority driven?
Well, there's this old joke, and that I was told when I got here. First, about a year ago this week was our orientation, so you kind of get there, and it's hard to believe you're a member of this legislative body where so much important measures have taken place over the years. And one of the senators, and I'm not going to embarrass him, so I can't tell you who it was, but this old joke in the Senate. No, what he said to me was, I know right now you're looking around here and wondering, how you got here, but 6 months from now you're going to be looking around and wonder how they got here. So, but the truth be told is, by and large, what I've met in the Senate are very nice people. I haven't had a single run-in with anybody that's been negative, who work very, very hard. For the most part, really believe the things they're fighting for. Some of them are just really wrong, and in my opinion, and have policies that I think are bad for our country. But ultimately, what you meet are pretty pleasant people who, and I think when you talk to people, there's this, a couple people have told me this. Joe Biden told us this once, but I read it in a book that Jesse Helms wrote as well. It kind of calls to light that you see that there's something special in everybody there, and that's why they're state elected. So, obviously I'm still getting to know a lot of these folks. There's 99 other people, and you don't get to know them all in 11 months, but generally impressed with their work ethic, their subject matter knowledge, but also a little bit disappointed by the lack of urgency on some of the major issues that confront our country.
What did you think of Seersucker Day?
When was that?
Okay.
I saw some people wearing it. Maybe that was the day. I don't know. I'm not a big seersucker fan, but I'm sure.
You weren't one of them. Okay.
But we haven't pulled it, so.
Senator, one of your clear interests is human trafficking. I'd be interested in...
Against it. Right.
Thank you. I'd be interested in how that got on your radar and what your priorities there.
Well, the truth is that, I've obviously been aware of it for a while, but there was a CNN special, and I know I'll get fact-checked on it. I think it was in March or April, and it really brought to light the issue of it actually was...
Well, I remember this was the one about Craigslist.
No, this one was special. This was when Demi Moore went somewhere in Africa and so I started looking at the issue in general, and my wife got really interested in the issue. We realized it was a problem here domestically. And it's not just the sex trafficking, which gets all the attention, and rightfully so. It's a very ugly thing, but there's also all sorts of forced labor issues that we face. And I've been semi-aware of it in the past because we've had some incidents in Florida. I think what I've been shocked by is kind of the prevalence here in the 21st century of it. And it's how in some ways our laws are helping to contribute to it, and unwittingly, obviously. But so you look at it on a domestic level, Florida plays a big role in the domestic problem, and then internationally, the issue that it's become, and just adopted a passion for it in terms of a human rights issue, and one that really is one of the great human rights causes of the early part of the century. Something I hope we can be able to work to eradicate, because 50% of the battle is just being aware that it's happening.
Tell us one fact about the problem that would surprise us.
I mean, one fact about it, I think one fact is that in this very city, there have been diplomats that have been accused of bringing people here to work for them as domestic workers and then aren't paying them. They're basically not allowed to have any contact with their families abroad, don't pay them, keep them in squalid conditions. We have a couple incidents going on as we speak of that. So I think they would shock people to think that they're members of the diplomatic corps who live in this city, walking distance from this building, and that they're, for all practical purposes, a slave living in their quarters.
What's the number one thing Congress could do?
Well, we have this reauthorization bill, which reauthorizes all kinds of measures, the important thing about it is that it really continues to become victim-centered, which is really what our laws need to be. Victims are the most important part of the element, because without their testimony and without their cooperation, you're not going to get convictions. You're not even going to be able to really bring people up on charges. And so I think that's important. But the second thing is just calling attention to it. Every chance we get, the State Department every year does a review of all the countries. We tier the countries depending on their level of compliance and cooperation, and really pressing that agenda. But I think it starts with our own example. I think we have to show that we take it seriously as a domestic issue and call attention to it. So I'll frequently go on the Senate floor and give a speech, I hope in the weeks to come, about different specific examples of domestic human trafficking problems, because I think we have to hold ourselves up to a higher standard if we're going to be a leader in the world.
Now, Senator, you made a recent visit to the Texas-Mexico border. I wonder what you learned there.
Well, a couple things. I mean, I visited, there's really 4 key sectors where people enter the United States through, and one of them is that El Paso border sector, and that's the one I visited. On the one hand, I mean, you're impressed by there's been progress made. There's no doubt that there are places where they showed you the old fence with a barbed wire thing, that was put up by the owner of that land, and now there's a more impressive, structure in its place that kind of has anti-tunneling features. It's a high fence, etc. And you can see where they're constructed in the right places have really helped make it more secure on the border. You also see the challenges associated with it. There are areas that are much harder to secure in the mountainous regions. It's kind of breathtaking to stand there and watch and realize you're inches. I mean, we stood on this side of the Rio Grande, which is, at certain points, the water's so low it looks like a ditch. And on one side is El Paso, Texas, which is one of the safest cities in America. At least, and they really brag about how well they've done in terms of keeping the crime rate down. And on the other side is one of the most dangerous cities in the hemisphere, in Ciudad Juarez. And separated by, and you realize that those are ultimately the factors that are contributing to this, is the fact that in their own country, people are not able to find opportunity. And when people can't find opportunity and provide a better life for their children and their grandchildren, they're going to find, or try to find, a place where they can do that. And ultimately, that is the driver behind what we're facing on the border.
Now, Senator, you said on Fox News that the Republican Party needs to be the pro-legal immigration party. How did the party get so on the wrong track on this issue?
Well, I mean, I want to be fair about it. We do have an illegal immigration problem, and people have become increasingly frustrated by it. Americans are very compassionate people, very open people. Immigration's forever been something we've bragged about. Only very recently has immigration become something so difficult for us to fully embrace. Although there are, in the early 19th and 20th century, in the early 20th century, there are obviously examples of times where people reacted negatively to immigration. By and large, it's something we've always prided ourselves in. But you have this problem that's only gotten worse, exacerbated by the downturn in the economy. 9% unemployment makes people even more upset. Government spending problems around the country makes people even more upset. And the sense that I get from talking to people is there's almost a sense that we're being taken advantage of, that our compassion and our openness is now being taken advantage of. And it's never that simple. I don't think people are thinking.
But that clearly has occurred.
Well, it has. But again, I don't think that's the calculation that most people have when they enter this country, legally or illegally, that I'm going to go in and take advantage of this. For the most part, they're driven by a desire to provide a better life for their children and their grandchildren. And it's a sentiment I know well. I grew up around it. It's the story of my family. It's the story of the people that we grew up around. But the question is, how do you do that in the 21st century in a way that's conducive to a process that's controlled and orderly? And that's why we need a legal immigration system that functions. And I think that's what we need to begin to focus on. I think it's pretty clear we're not in favor of amnesty, but now what are we for? What reforms, what modernizations are we for? And I hope we can enter that conversation because there are things we can do to improve the legal immigration system and make it work better for everybody involved, and would in fact help to deal with the illegal immigration problem if we did.
What's the biggest single thing that would help?
The visa programs are broken. They're not taking into account, well, I talked about one, which is these per-country quotas, but I mean, we don't have a workable visa programs that take into account the needs of the 21st century. Our guest worker program that's adjusted to economic needs. So you would argue that when unemployment's at 4%, the need for guest workers is much higher than when unemployment's at 9%. But either way, there's some need. So why can't we provide a system whereby people apply in their home country, There's a willing worker overseas. There's a needed job that no American will fill. That's been verified in the United States. They apply in their home country. They receive a work permit, a tamper-proof card of some sort. They enter the United States. They work for that defined period of time. They return home and they come back again when they're needed. And if we had that kind of system, not only would it make us more secure, it would actually cut down on overstays. Because one of the reasons why people overstay is once they get in, they're afraid to leave and never be able to get back in again. So,
now, what's something that your party could do to do better with Latino voters?
well, I think the number one issue in the Latino, the Americans of Hispanic descent, among them is the same as it is nationally, and that's jobs in the economy. Unemployment is higher in the Hispanic community than it is around the country. Joblessness is hurting as much as it is anywhere else.
But the party took a dramatic downturn from where President Bush was to where they were in 2008. What accounts for that? How do you do better? People say that if you don't do better with the Hispanic vote, we won't have another Republican president.
I don't do the political calculation on it. The truth of the matter is because the Hispanic, because the Hispanic community is not a monolith. I mean, to say the Hispanic community, the Hispanic community means it has different needs in different parts of the country, depending on their heritage, where they came from, what their shared experience. There is commonality between Puerto Rican voters in Central Florida and Mexican Americans in the Southwest, and there's also differences in their experiences. But at the end of the day, what really drives people, what brings people to the United States, is the desire to provide a better life for their families. So which political party is going to have an economic agenda that offers that? And I think Republicans have to make a better case, myself included, that the American free enterprise system is the best system in human history to allow people not just to provide for themselves, but to give their children and their grandchildren more opportunities. And we have to do a better job of doing that. The rhetoric on immigration is hurt because it's hard to get people to listen to that argument if they think, maybe you're not being friendly to them or to their plight. And so it's important that we get the rhetoric right. It's important that we be for pro-legal immigration measures. But ultimately, what will help the Republican Party do better among all Americans, including those of Hispanic descent, is a vigorous, thoughtful defense of the free enterprise system and of the proper role of government.
Okay. Let's look abroad for a little bit, Senator. What happens when Castro dies?
Hopefully a lot of good things, but we don't know. That's the answer. We've never really confronted a situation like this in this hemisphere. A country run by people in their late 70s and early 80s. Time's not on their side, obviously, and they're trying desperately to try to institutionalize, protect their economic gains. It really has become kind of a communist military dictatorship where the government is really in business, and Cuba is their land holding. And
what's the deal with this? Like, they can sell their cars now, they can buy houses?
Yeah, I mean, it really is sad to think that it's almost like throwing crumbs off the table and say, okay, we'll allow you to eat a crumb, but not the loaf of bread. That people are allowed to, first of all, buy and sell property based on what property rights laws. I mean, what are they going to rewrite the property rights code? But I think more importantly, it really doesn't get to the fundamental issue in Cuba, which is political liberties and political freedoms. The people of Cuba, they are a free people, can choose any economic model they want. I mean, they can choose a Western European model, they can choose the American model, that's up to them to decide what kind of economy they want to have. My fundamental concern in Cuba is not the economic model they choose, although I'll have some suggestions. I think my underlying concern in Cuba is political freedom. And those don't exist. There are no political openings in Cuba, none whatsoever. And that is what we should be focused on. If the political openings come and people in Cuba have a voice in the process, they can choose the economic system for themselves. And that's what we should be a voice on behalf of, is a political opening. And that's not happening.
Okay. Should the U.S. normalize relations with Cuba?
No. And I'll tell you for two reasons. Number one is because any relations you have with Cuba is all on their terms, 100%. So any relationship you have with their government, it's a perfect example is remittances and travel to the islands, which I think is well-intentioned. But it's helped, what it does is it drives hard currency. It is a major source of hard currency that the regime uses, which the administration concedes as part of a balancing act. It's hard currency that they use to fund themselves and keep themselves in power. The second thing is leverage. You asked me what happens after Fidel Castro and Raul Castro disappears. Well, I think if there's still economic sanctions on Cuba, we'll have a lot more influence over what happens. Because now we can go to them and say, you want a relationship with the United States, you want a normal economic relationship and political relationship with us, you have to have political freedoms. You have to join the rest of the Western Hemisphere and have a democracy. And you do that, and you'll have a friend in us. So the leverage of the sanctions is critically important, because that moment you outlined is coming.
Okay. I'm going to bring you all into the conversation in just a second. I think we have a microphone that you can grab. I'm going to stick abroad for just a second. Senator, you've carved out a sort of on foreign policy, you've carved out a sort of stripe as a Bush-style hawk. You were ahead of the president on Libya. You eventually got to where you were roughly. If the U.S. had credible evidence, this is on Syria, if the U.S. had credible evidence that Assad was about to commit a major massacre of civilians, should the U.S. intervene militarily?
Well, let me just say the evidence kind of is already there. I mean, I think he's willing to kill anybody who wants to overthrow him. So the point is he's willing, I don't think there's any price he's not willing to pay. I don't think there's any act he's not willing to take in order to place himself in power. Foreign policy is complicated because no two situations are alike. And you outlined Syria versus Libya. The consequences are the two different situations, and I'll outline why. Libya had an organized rebellion. They were armed. They were making progress. At one point, they were making tremendous progress and were on the verge of toppling the Gaddafi regime. And they specifically asked for a no-fly zone. That's what they asked for to help them finish the job themselves. You don't have that in Syria. And quite frankly, I don't know if we want that in Syria, because one of the things that the Assad regime is using in Syria is they want there to be, they understand violence. They understand how to deal with violence. And so if they're confronted by a violent uprising in Syria, they know how to crush that. What they don't know how to deal with is a peaceful protest, a peaceful movement. That's a hard thing, by the way, to advocate for when I'm sitting here in Washington, D.C., and they're getting their heads cracked open in Syria. But that's the thing that really threatens the Assad regime, is a peaceful movement. And so I would think that the ideal scenario in Syria is not an armed conflict that the United States gets involved in, but rather a peaceful one that actually continues on the route that it's on now. You saw the Arab League taking measures. Turkey's been very forceful. I think Assad is running out of time. Your question's a very difficult one, and I don't know if there is a situation where U.S. and there's difference of opinion. Joe Lieberman's much more hawkish about it, but I don't know if there's a military engagement that U.S. could get involved in, even an international coalition, that could prevent that in Syria, the way it was able to prevent it in Libya.
And Senator, you saw the other night at the South Carolina debate, Rick Perry said that he would start foreign aid at zero and then negotiate from there. What do you think of that?
Well, I think the concept, and I'm not putting words in their mouth, I don't know exactly what they meant by it, other than I think the concept is that what they're saying is that everything needs to justify itself.
Yes,
and I think everyone would agree with that. I mean, when has it ever been a good idea to throw away money?
But you have, for a Republican, you have an interesting idea about foreign aid. You're not against it?
No, on the contrary. First of all, it's a very smart part of our overall budget. Second, we don't have a choice. We're not Luxembourg. Okay, we don't have a choice. Everything that happens in your day-to-day, virtually everything that happens in our economic life, is deeply influenced by what's happening around the world. I mean, Europe may seem very far away to some people, but you may not know that your pension or your retirement is invested in Europe, and certainly invested in things that are going to be impacted by Europe. And that's just one. And Europe is impacted by what happens in Libya, whether it's oil prices or political instability, and mass migrations that come as a result of that. My point being is that the U.S. doesn't have a choice but to be involved around the world. And many of these countries, the only thing they know about the United States, for example in Africa, is that we provide anti-HIV medication. And it's a humanitarian thing to do. And I think the United States, we're not just a smart people. We're not just a hardworking people. We are blessed. There's no nation on earth, no people in the history of mankind has had more blessings than the American people have had. And with that comes an obligation. And I think we have to live up to that obligation within our means. And I think that's why foreign aid is so important. And the other is as an instrument of influence. If you're not involved in the country, if you're not giving foreign aid in Egypt as an example, and some other places, then what do they care what we think about anything? Okay. So you use it as some level of influence.
Okay, do we have a question here? Somebody have a microphone? Yes, sir. And if you don't mind just saying who you are.
That's like a talk show.
Good morning. My name is Tom Myers. I'm from the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. Morning, Senator. We've met before. I wanted to talk briefly about AIDS in the United States, specifically the AIDS Drug Assistance Program. It's part of the federal Ryan White program that provides AIDS drugs to people who are low income, limited means. As you know, Senator, Florida has one of the largest waiting lists in the country for this program. Recently, your office, through age, has been approached about shifting funds from less critical uses in the AIDS budget and other places within HHS, CDC, to the ADAP program. Given the recent studies that showed that treatment not only saves lives, but is the most effective way of preventing new infections, up to 96% less, preventing up to 96% of all infections, would you be in favor of shifting funds from less critical uses to fix those waiting lists and make sure that Americans who need the AIDS drugs can get them to save their lives and prevent new infections?
Well, just first of all, and before I obviously make public commitments about things that I need to fully understand, we're talking about shifting a lot of money within one budget to the other, and given this tough economic times and the consequences of what that would mean, I would hate to make a commitment to you today that then I have to come back to you and say that. But what I will do is go back and look at that more carefully, because it's something we care about. Because I think on a broader perspective, actually calls attention to what I think is one of the fundamental issues we face as a country, and that's this balancing act as a people. On the one hand, we want prosperity. On the other hand, we want compassion, and we want a nation that's both compassionate and prosperous. And how do you accomplish both things? And I think what you're talking about, and we are too rich, too prosperous, and quite frankly, too compassionate a people to allow people to die or allow people to suffer because they can't afford access to life-saving medications. And so ultimately, we've accepted that in this country as something that we want our government to be involved in doing. The fundamental question, and it doesn't go to your, obviously your issue is very specific about you're actually identifying where the money will come from. A lot of people that come to us asking for funding requests don't do that. So we'll look at that and take it very seriously. But more importantly is, at the fundamental level, is this the proper role of government? And I think for things like this it is. As a people, we're not prepared, nor should we ever be, to say that we should leave the disabled, the infirm, the elderly to fend for themselves. On the other hand, these programs all have to be created with an eye on the fact that we have to have an economy that can afford these things, that can help sustain them. So we have to have enough prosperity so we can afford to pay for these things we all agree we want our government to be doing. And I think HIV is an example of something we made tremendous progress in as a nation. It was a crisis when I was growing up in the early 80s that basically was a death sentence. And today you have people that live normal, meaningful lives with HIV. And because of not just advances in the medications, but access to very expensive treatment regimens. So thanks for your question, and we'll certainly answer you as early as today, hopefully.
Right, Senator, to go home for a little bit. Back in Florida, Republicans hold strong majorities in both chambers of the state legislature, a strong majority of the congressional delegation, and yet everyone who looks at the presidential race says it's a toss-up. How could that be?
Well, first of all, I think the Republican Party has just done a better job in Florida, been better organized, and run better candidates and run better elections. I think at the macro level, and a bigger picture, Florida, when it comes to voting for president or even for governor, people are a little bit more open-minded than they would be at a lower level. If you're a party line voter or someone with identification as a member of a party, you're probably not as well informed about a legislative candidate as you are about who's running for governor or who's running for president. So Florida has a lot of people that are registered Democrat, for example, in the Northwest region, who have voted for Republicans in the past, and vice versa. It has many people that are registered as Republicans in Southeast Florida that will vote for a Democrat in an election. Hence, you see this back and forth between George W. Bush winning 2 elections in Florida and then Barack Obama winning the election in Florida, and now we'll see. So it is a toss-up state. I guess it's neither a blue nor a red state. That would make it, I guess, a purple state. And I think it's a place where all the national issues are front and center. It's one of the reasons why I always thought Florida should be early in the primary cycle.
And what do you think is the Republican nominee's chance in Florida?
Good. I think at least 50-50, given the circumstances. But that vote's going to have to be earned.
Yeah. And what will the nominee need to do to get Florida?
I think the same things they're going to have to do to win nationally. And again, that kind of is a testament to Florida's microcosm nature. And first and foremost is provide a compelling vision of how are we going to make things better, because they can be better. The 21st century can be the American century. Here are the things we need to do in order to make that happen. And here are the things standing in the way of that happening. And do it in a compelling way, in essence in a positive, optimistic way, because people at their core, even though they're pessimistic about the short term, believe that things can get better if only a few fundamental things happen. And they're looking for someone to show them the way, and I think it's important for Republicans to provide a very clear contrast from the policies they will pursue and the outcomes they think that will generate as compared to the president's record over the last 4 years.
Senator, you touched on some of those themes when you gave a major speech out at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California. What was the library like? What was your reception?
Very impressive. I grew up in the era of Ronald Reagan. I guess I was in 3rd grade when he was elected, and I was in high school when he left. And so you kind of had a major influence in my upbringing. I grew up in Ronald Reagan's America. So just to kind of be there and see some of these things that, obviously the plane is there now, so that's pretty impressive. Meeting Ms. Reagan was fantastic. We had an opportunity to, one of the great things about the Reagans was their marriage and the model that it is for so many people in terms of how committed they were to one another. So we were at dinner and my wife was with me, and Ms. Reagan turns to her and says, when Jeanette starts asking Ms. Reagan about Ronald Reagan and what he was like as a husband, just kind of their marriage is so well documented. And she turns to her and says, Ronnie, she called him, used to send my mom flowers every one of Nancy's birthdays, thanking her for having me. And I'm just thinking, oh gosh. And then he goes, Andy, you read me over 700 love letters or something like that. And I'm just thinking, man, I am in a deep, deep hole.
The Senator, back home, Tampa is going to be home of the Republican National Convention this year. What's that going to be like?
It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have access there to the Bay. And, it's not just Tampa. It's actually, the Tampa Bay region includes St. Petersburg. It's a great place to be. They both have fascinating downtown areas with a lot of entertainment establishments. But beyond that, just access to I encourage people to go out into the Gulf, and find a way to get out there, whether you're into sailing, boating, fishing. The beaches, particularly in St. Pete, are really nice. It'll be a little warm. It's late August, a little muggy. Hopefully the mosquitoes, won't be a big problem. I don't think they will be. We'll make sure whatever we need to do about that, we'll do it. And I think people are going to have a great time. We're going to have a great convention.
All right, well, that's fine. But Scott out there is saying, what do I do at night?
At night?
Yes.
Well, it depends who you are. I think there's, like I said, there's a lot of very fine entertainment establishments in the downtown areas of Tampa and St. Petersburg. I think people have fun there.
What's the steakhouse that has the world's largest wine collection or something like that? The country's wine.
Oh, Burns?
Yeah. What's that like?
It's I've only been there a couple times. It's
what's another couple places we should go?
In the Tampa area?
Yeah.
Well, there's actually Leroy Selman's place is really good. It's right by the airport. That's the one I'd recommend. He was a Hall of Fame player for the Tampa Bay Bucks. He has a restaurant right near the airport when you get out. It's a pretty good place. People should try that if they like it.
All right. Now, when we're in Tampa, it might be that you'll have a big entourage with you. Are you prepared?
Entourage, yeah.
Are you prepared to be president?
To be president of what? The United States? I'm not running for president of the United States. I'm a United States senator, and I think that let me just say a thing about the presidency, and not about me, but just in general. Ultimately, what you want in a president is the ability to analyze situations and make decisions based on sound judgment. And oftentimes, particularly on foreign policy, what you're making decisions on is not between two good choices. It's between two less than ideal choices, and you're trying to figure out which one is better, which one is worse. So I think that's the quality to look for in a president. And I think for the most part, I'm not running for president, okay, but I think for the most part, as a senator, many of the decision-making processes are similar. You have to take positions on issues that you're going to be judged by history on them, whether you made the right choice or the wrong choice. So for example, when I've spoken out on some of the foreign policy things, that some in my own party are kind of in a mood of maybe we should kind of disengage a little bit from the world and focus more on domestic things. And I get that's very appealing. But I think if you look at the big picture of it and analyze how that decision will be looked at 10 or 15 years from now, I think to disengage from some of these issues in the world 10 or 15 years from now will be viewed as a major mistake. So you have to be able to analyze things like that. It's something I hope I'm developing in the United States Senate, and it's the kind of quality I'm looking for from our nominee and from our next president.
Senator, you've said you don't want to be vice president. Why not?
Because I'm focused on my job in the Senate. I mean, why
No,
not
what's
in the
wrong-
Senate?
what's
Well,
wrong with
wrong
the
with
office?
Senate? What's wrong with the U.S. Senate office? I mean, the question is, where can I have a bigger influence on the things that we're working on? And I ran for the U.S. Senate because I wanted to be a U.S. Senator, because I wanted to serve in this institution. I wanted to do the kinds of things that I'm working on now. I wanted to do more of them. I wanted to be a voice for Florida. And I'm learning how to do that. I think we're really getting the hang of how to do that. And I'm enjoying that, and it's what I ran for. So, I mean, the question is, why not the Senate? Why somehow have we come to believe that being in the Senate is no longer a meaningful place, that there's somehow even a better job out there somewhere?
Okay, in 90 seconds, I'm going to come back to you for another question. You commute down to Miami. Your wife, Jeanette, 2 sons, 2 daughters are down there. What is that commute like? How's the family adjusted to this?
It's been tough. It's been hard, and we still always, think about whether we should move up here or not. It hasn't been... some days are tougher than others. It's hard to realize that, you're not around on Tuesdays or Wednesdays. It's not, it's difficult on the kids on Sundays. It's difficult on me. So, I got to figure that out.
What's the age range of the kids?
The girls are 11 and 9, and the boys are 6 and 4. Yeah.
And what is the sort of consideration as far as what we're doing here?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, we have very deep family roots in Miami. All her family, all my family. It's kind of where we grew up. I like getting back to the state every weekend. I like connecting with people. I like going to the grocery store and having people tell me nice things and not so nice things. I like hearing. I like, to do those sorts of things. So, on the other hand, I mean, I still believe, and I'm not sure I always get this right, but my number one job is still husband and father. I got to get those right, and it's hard to do that when you're not there. So, it's an ongoing struggle. We got to figure that out.
Now, Senator, you have both a Catholic church here and at home. How often do you go to church?
I try to go every day. I don't always go every day. One of the great treasures of the Catholic faith is the ability to go to Mass every day. And so it's something we try to do. We have a great church 90 seconds from the door there at the Hart Building, and I try to go every day. I don't always make it, but they also have confession every day at 11:50, which I found very useful in this process. Nothing bad, but I mean, I guess it's bad, you're confessing. But, and then,
No felonies.
Yeah, no felonies. And that's a pretty low standard. And then obviously on Sundays, and then we've also, established a relationship with a non-Catholic church that we've enjoyed going to services there for years, and we try to still go there from time to time. And really
What kind of church is that?
well, they're aligned with the Southern Baptist Convention, but they're really their motif is really denomination, and they just do a great job of teaching the written word. I mean, they do a great job of that.
You say you've established a relationship.
Yeah, we started going because we had friends that went there. We really enjoyed their sermons. They were, you can see them online sometimes, and they're good. Their pastor's very good, and we enjoy listening to that and the way they teach. But like I said, and I don't. At the end of the day, have found that our faith has been a source of strength and really a source of clarity, and gives everything some perspective. I mean, when your perspective is eternity, and I'm not saying mine always is, believe me, I'm as guilty as anyone of the day-to-day, but you get a better perspective, I think, on what matters and what doesn't.
Good. I wonder if we have a question in the zip code. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Senator Rubio. You mentioned your trip to El Paso and the difference between El Paso and
just say who you are.
Sorry.
It's like Donahue, the caller there.
Steve Hawkins, I work for Pension and Borough. You mentioned your trip to El Paso and the difference between Ciudad Juarez and El Paso and how that reflected the difference in economic conditions and the immigration issue. But surely it also reflects the war on drugs in Mexico and how that's being conducted there. Right now, the Mexican people are considering whether it's worth conducting this campaign at all. So how should the United States continue to make the case that it's worth conducting this war, which is having such a heavy cost in Mexico, or should it reconsider it altogether?
Yeah.
Okay, and just pass the microphone 2 rows behind you. That gentleman's going to be next. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that Mexico deserves better. Mexico deserves to be and it has all the conditions necessary to be prosperous and to provide great opportunities for its people. You can't do that when drug gangs run portions of the country. The Mexican government understands that, and I think the Mexican people understand. They're paying a very high price. It's very similar, by the way, in some respects to what you saw happen in Colombia and the efforts that are still happening there to try to kind of gain control of their nation and their own sovereignty. On the other hand, I think the United States needs to continue to encourage that, both in trade relations with Mexico and assistance to Mexico, and quite frankly, in dealing with the domestic consumption problem, which is the driver of this. I mean, anytime you talk to the Mexican government or Mexican people about the problems they're facing, they'll remind you very quickly that where these drugs are headed are to American cities where Americans are buying them. So I think in order for us to have a moral standing on the issue, we have to also do a better job of addressing the domestic issues that we face in terms of consumption. But I think Mexico deserves better. One of the great developments of this 21st century will be if Mexico can emerge from this and really grow economically. Imagine the United States bordered by Mexico to the south and Canada to the north, 2 free and prosperous nations, and what it would mean for us as a nation and as a people. And we would hope for that. I think that's what the Mexican people want, and I think we should be helping them in that regard any way we can.
Okay, sir, you're on.
Hi, good morning, Senator Rubio. Thank you very much for hosting this, Mike Allen. My name is Spencer Fogel. I'm a sophomore at the George Washington University School of Media and Public Affairs. I'm a little bit of a political wonk, so I was wondering if you could tell me if you're intending to weigh in on the Senate race in Florida. I know that Connie Mack recently threw his hat into the ring. What do you think about this race that's heating up?
Well, it's an interesting race that continues to develop, and I'm not going to get involved in the primary. Ultimately, my hope is to help the Republican nominee because I want us to get a majority in the United States Senate. I think we can do a lot more if we were in the majority. So, but I don't intend to get involved in the primary. I think we have all really good candidates running. We're blessed to have people like that willing to offer themselves up for public service, and we'll see how it plays out.
Senator, you're unique in this room, one of the few people in the city. You're both an autobiographer and a biography. You've pitched a book. What's going on with your book?
Well, we'll see. First of all, people have to want to read it. So good luck to the people writing a book and to me as well. But I think as far as writing a book, I mean, it's not some. There's some people are interested in my background and what that all means and how it helped me arrive at certain political conclusions. But ultimately, I think I have something I want to say as well about not just what the 2010 elections meant, but about some of the issues facing our country and kind of. One of the questions I get from people all the time is, what is it like? What has surprised you? What has disappointed you? What's most surprised you? What most concerns you? And my answer is going to probably be, you got to read the book, because that's what we're going to try to outline in there in a meaningful way.
Your biographer, Manuel Roy Franzia, The Washington Post, his book is out next year. He's here. What's it like to be written about?
I don't know. I haven't noticed it. We'll see when the book comes out. I'll tell you when I read it.
Now, Senator, a question that I ask at every Playbook breakfast is, there are people nodding to want to be you. Like, what do you do to succeed in Washington? If I'm one of these young interns, what do I do to be successful?
It depends what you want to be. And there's a lot of ways to be involved in the political process. You can cover it, you can run campaigns, you can work in an office on the policy level, you can run for office. They're all choices, they come with consequences, they come, you know, I got involved as an intern in a congressional office in 1991, and that's how I got involved. And from there, you know, kind of ran for a city commission and then ran into the Florida House, and it just developed from there. You know, there's different ways of looking at it. One of the people I really admire, who's been a big influence on me, is Jeb Bush, and his advice always was, which I never took, was, wait, go into business, be successful at something else, and then go into politics. I kind of did it the other way. And there are benefits to that, and there are consequences to it. I think the benefit of being involved early in life in politics is a certain level of idealism and drive, that maybe life starts to wear on you, maybe you don't have as much. That doesn't mean you can't be idealistic at 60, and you should be, but certainly I think time develops people in that way. So a sense that there isn't anything that is impossible, and sometimes you're right, and sometimes you're not. On the other hand, there's benefits to life experience. There's benefits to having been a CEO of a business, of having created opportunities, of having raised your children. It just really depends on what the time is right for you. But I would encourage people to get involved in the political process. It can be messy, but I think what you always have to understand is that we have elections in this country, and we have arguments and say nasty things to each other in this country. But those same issues are resolved in other parts of the world. The way they solve them is through civil wars. They shoot at each other. So I'd much rather have a negative ad or an oppo dump, where they go out and hit me in a press clipping. I'd much rather have that than someone shooting on my house.
But what about
which is what happens around the world when your political opponents don't agree with you.
What about the scrutiny, though? You've had some pretty tough things written about.
Yeah, but how does that dealt with? So if someone doesn't like you in American politics, they write an ugly article about you, or at least try to get one written. If someone doesn't like you in some countries around the world, they decapitate you or blow up your car.
Well, that's fine, but it's painful. But it's painful in the moment. It must be.
Well, it's unpleasant, but ultimately it's part of the deal. I mean, it's ultimately, when you sign up for it, it comes with all these things, and this is one of them. You want it to be fair, you want it to be accurate, but ultimately it's part of the deal. I mean, I don't have to do this. There's other things I could do in my life and my time. I think about that sometimes, but I want to do this. I want to make a difference. I mean, I get it. I mean, it's the price of admission to this stage, and I'm blessed to be on it. And I think ultimately, at the end of the day, people are smart. They'll make decisions based on what's wise.
All right, Senator, we're getting the hook here, so as we say goodbye, I'm going to ask you about music. Is it true that you like rap?
Yeah, probably the stuff in the 90s, and even stuff now is pretty good. I get in trouble when I talk about that a little bit, because maybe I shouldn't listen to that anymore, but the music is good. So there's all kind. Actually, I'll tell you what I've developed over the summer. A little bit of, because now you're going to ask me who my favorite artist is and all that, but I mean, my wife likes country music, and so I've listened to it. It's good. I mean, it's all right. I can listen to that. And what I don't listen to is classical music. Nothing against it. I'll probably get to that point just one day, I suppose. It sounds really good.
Hang out in the Senate. You'll get there.
I'll get to that. But I do like a lot of the modern music stuff, and you just got to sometimes ignore what the politics may be, and just enjoy the music.
And you said it gets you in trouble. Why is that?
Well, just because people listen to some of the lyrics in these songs and they're like, oh, should you really be listening to that? And it's probably you shouldn't, I guess. It's certainly my kids won't be listening to it. But if I limited my music to conservative, artists, I haven't had a lot to listen to. So they're artists, I listen to their music, but not to their politics, I guess.
All right, well, we're appreciative to the people at live stream land who are watching. We're appreciative to our boss, Fred Ryan, who's here, to Bank of America for making these conversations possible, to you for coming out so early, very kind of you, early birds, and Senator Rubio, thank you for a great conversation.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.